Dear Solia community, dear facilitators, my name is Raphael Tisblat and I am supporting program design at Solia. I feel blessed to have been working with Solia almost since its foundation. As we approach the start of the implementation of the First Year Connect, I wanted to tell you a few words. In a few days, we will embark on a pilot phase of this new program, which Solia has been preparing for over the last couple of years. We're very excited because we believe it is more important than ever to expose more and more young people to the experience of dialogue across difference. This is what we've been doing for the past 18 years with our international program, the Connect program. But this program is different for several reasons. Through First Year Connect, it is the first time that we will gather incoming students from the same campus. More importantly, it is the first time that dialogue will be used not just as an educational tool, not just as conflict prevention tool, but arguably also as a sort of conflict transformation tool. While First Year Connect, we are operating in an environment that is not just tense. The intercommunal polarization in the United States has been increasing to the point that many fear uncontrolled escalation. In the past years, US campuses have been subject to a lot of tensions and even violence around certain topics. The red-blue divide, issues of free speech and hate speech, gender, LGBTQ++, Israel-Palestine, socio-economic inequalities, and of course, race. To reduce this violence, Solia and its community of facilitators have been trusted by two colleges, SUNY Potsdam and Amherst, to conduct constructive dialogues around those topics in order to year after year progressively change the culture of engagement around important but divisive issues, from a confrontational one to a cooperative one. Of course, what has been happening lately in the United States, ever since George Floyd was killed, even if racism is everything except a new phenomenon, gives an even heavier dimension to this program. If all the themes I just mentioned will be important for students to engage on, it is not obvious that race will most likely take the center stage of all the conversations you will facilitate. So we're of course excited about this potential good that this program will bring, but we're also very aware of the importance of doing this right. A lot is at stake for the students, their campuses, and the society they live in. A lot is at stake also for Solia and even for the field of dialogue in general. We know that in our field, there is a potential tension between dialogue and social justice. We know that in the face of dire injustice, it can be hard to see the value in dialogue. We know that dialogue has even been seen as dangerous by many because it may mean normalizing injustice. Would neutrality mean siding with the oppressor? We want to be clear about these concepts, even if they are subtle. Dialogue is not about normalizing injustice. Neither is it about finding some sort of compromise between racists and minorities, for instance. Dialogue is something else. It's about enabling a different kind of conversation. If any normalization occurs in dialogue, it would be about the fact that these are bound to be difficult conversations. But it would never be about the fact that injustice exists and oppression exists. On the contrary, we believe that dialogue, along with anti-racism education and anti-racist policies, is one way to reach social justice and racial justice. It does so by supporting and enabling all parties to have a conversation where everyone can express themselves and everyone can be heard. We do believe and have seen countless times in our programs that when deep, authentic, and respectful conversations happen, when there is a combination of critical thinking and empathy, the result is not just learning, not just mutual understanding, not just relationship building, but also a real commitment for positive change. Of course, this is difficult. There's never a guarantee that dialogue will trigger these mental shifts and commitments. And dealing with differences can be a long and painful process. Most people are not used to engaging with those who are different or think differently from them for an extended period of time. But if we are implementing dialogue, it implies that people with different identities and sometimes radically different worldviews will participate. And whether your students appear to be conflict avoidant or very confrontational, these conversations will be anything except easy and comfortable. So we have a few recommendations for you as you prepare to facilitate these important and difficult conversations. The first important thing as you prepare to act as facilitators is to be very clear about what we mean by neutrality and multipartiality. First, let's talk about neutrality. Nobody is neutral. Neutrality doesn't exist in the real world. Everybody has opinion. No one can pretend that their behavior is devoid of external or internal influence. Nobody is a robot. But the word neutrality exists. And so what we mean by neutrality in the facilitator's case is that they should refrain from sharing what they think on controversial issues. Not because they do not want to take a stance as human beings, but because they understand that their role in that moment is to support a group to talk about those topics in a manner that wouldn't occur naturally without the help of a facilitator. The moment the facilitator directly takes part in a conversation where people in the group are potentially not in agreement, she will automatically leave her position as facilitator and stop being a guarantee that the dialogue process continues. Concretely, if even one person in the group feels like the facilitator may disagree with her or judge her, it will impact that participant's ability to be authentic. Neutrality in facilitation is the effort to refrain from being a participant and from influencing the course of the conversation. Of course, that effort requires a lot of self-awareness, which require a lot of self-work, debriefing, and supervision, which is part of the reason why Soliya will support facilitators through coaching and debrief sessions. Now, if facilitators were only neutral, the dialogue wouldn't go very far. But facilitators are not just neutral. They're multipartial and even omnipartial. Multipartiality is the indispensable reverse side of the neutrality principle. So facilitators are refraining from participating, yes, but they are also trying to ensure that everyone feels welcome in the conversation and supported to share their honest and respectful thinking and hear that of others. It's about supporting everyone in the group, not agreeing with what they say or think, but supporting them as participants to speak, be heard, and hear others. Omnipartiality goes even further by bringing all potential opinions, beliefs, and feelings in the conversation, including those that are not expressed by the actual participants in the group, but do exist in the outside context. It's very useful for groups who are conflict avoidant or who tend to all agree, because it signals that there are different opinions out there and that the group would benefit from exploring the reasons why those differences exist. Questions like, do people around you agree with you? What would someone from another background say? Why do you think they would say that? All those are very useful questions to expose the group to the differences they will eventually have to face in their campus lives. Multipartiality and omnipartiality are one of the best ways to help a conversation go deep and ensure maximum understanding. Now, all that being said, even as professional facilitators holding those two principles high, there are things that we cannot tolerate in dialogue. Bullying, attacking, belittling, using insults or racist slurs, for instance, should be banned from the dialogue. Supporting everyone cannot mean accepting that some get attacked and hurt without intervention. If that happens, that will mean that those who are hurt are not supported. Multipartiality actually requires that facilitators stop disrespectful or aggressive behavior in order to ensure that everyone is supported to participate authentically and respectfully. So, neutrality and multipartiality don't mean allowing violence. Moreover, dialogue as we practice it is not power blind. On the contrary, cultural or group differences do not take place in a political vacuum. Whether in the Connect program or First Year Connect, cultural differences are always intertwined with power dynamics and imbalances. all the conversations we facilitate show that interconnection between power and identity. And it is certainly even more so with First Year Connect. So dialogue is about detecting and acknowledging the power dynamics that inevitably infuse and affect differences of identity, culture, or perceptions. Facilitators help the group acknowledge those power dynamics and take responsibility to do something about it. Now, you all know from your training that one, power dynamics are part of any cross-cultural or intergroup engagement. And of course, again, that is particularly the case in the US context when putting together people of different races. You know that if you don't address those power dynamics, those in higher power will enjoy dialogue but not learn much. And those in lower power could feel hurt and want to leave. And you know that the best way to address them in the frame of a dialogue is to acknowledge those dynamics in order to make people aware of them. And by becoming aware of them, the group can then feel more responsible and empowered to address them in the group and in the broader society. So, concretely, the kind of intervention you would make when power dynamics are at play resembles something like, so I noticed that those participants, name it black, white, people of color, males, females, etc., take more space, or show more emotions, or are using more intellectual arguments, or are in a teaching mode, whatever it is. Just capture the dynamic at play, name it, and then ask, why do you think that is? How do you feel about this dynamic? How do these imbalances reflect those that exist in society? How do they affect us as a group? And is there anything we can do as a group to address these imbalances? Of course, if you want to intervene, you need to know how to detect the signs of these power dynamics at play. For instance, any word or phrase that translate condescendence, patronizing, or even disrespect. For instance, if someone says, I just don't think black people are serving their cause when they protest violently. One can consider this as a fair statement, but it also translates a dominant attitude in a context where black people are so often being told how to behave. Generally, one does not have to be an expert in the topics discussed in order to be a good facilitator. After all, we're process leaders, not content leaders. However, if you want to avoid getting lost in translation, missing crucial opportunities, and even doing harm to the individuals or the group, you do need to understand the language being used and the context in which they're being used. Understand what is meant when some people say Black Lives Matter, while others say All Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter. Understand what is meant by race, white fragility, microaggressions, structural racism, allyship, or intersectionality, for instance. In the case of the United States, language around the race topic may have become richer than in any other region of the world. The English language naturally allows the renewal and enrichment of vocabulary, but the intensity and democratization of public discourse created many, many new complex categories, concepts, and even phrases that carry a lot of meaning and a lot of baggage. Through dialogue, those terms absolutely need to be deconstructed, meaning analyzed and broken down into its simplest components, in order to ensure understanding between participants. In fact, deconstructing concepts, transforming them from abstraction to concrete realities, is one of the main values of dialogue across differences, because it allows people to engage spontaneously without feeling threatened. The best way to not get lost and help your groups reach this understanding is to study. Inform yourself about the history and the reality of racism in the United States. Read from liberal and conservative sources, from black and white authors, from people on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, who have different views on those issues. Inform yourself about their discourses so that you're able to follow and maintain the right process for their exchange. Now, as you explore and learn beyond your own knowledge, you might get dizzy at the complexity of public discourses, the broadening gap in understanding, and the intensity of the clashes. In order to be able to recognize those signs of power dynamics, we invite you in particular, if you're not a US citizen, to go through the list of external resources that we have compiled for you. Those resources don't all necessarily reflect Solia's positions, but we believe they are a good way to be more familiar with the various discourses around race in the United States and beyond. Also, go through the glossary we've put together, which provides definitions of certain key concepts around race and which are often used in the interactions affected by power dynamics that take place in discussions around race. Go through the document listing a number of common microaggressions so you're able to detect them when they happen and uncover with the group why there are microaggressions. Power dynamics, trigger words, microaggressions, coded language, loaded terms, many of those moments can come up in those conversations. You will need to know how to detect them and make sure that you never leave any of them unaddressed. Whenever something is being said which shows the presence of those power dynamics, facilitators should absolutely acknowledge them, even if that means interrupting the flow of the conversation. If we don't do that, it will not only be a missed opportunity to learn, it will likely hurt participants and damage their trust in the process. As facilitators, we sometimes shy away from interrupting a conversation where everyone's participating, especially because we feel we have so much to cover in the dialogue. But if we end up covering a lot of topics without seizing those moments, it will definitely affect the quality of dialogue. In general, if an entire 2-hour session only focuses on one thing, a trigger word, a subtle concept, a slogan, it wouldn't be a loss of time. On the contrary, the power of dialogue is to make explicit and analyze in a deep way that which is only implicit, but still potentially hurtful or likely to create more misunderstanding. So that can take time. And that means that you won't be able to cover all the topics you hope to cover. That's okay. During dialogue, please stop and pause the conversation and focus on whatever comes up that needs to be acknowledged, addressed, and deconstructed. Concretely, again, if someone says something that carries a lot of meaning and is potentially a source of misunderstanding or potentially perceived as offensive, stop and say, "So I'm hearing you say this and that, correct? What did you mean by this?" And then observe what you see in the group in terms of reactions. And you say, "I noticed people had a strong reaction when that word was pronounced. Is that right? What does that word mean to you? How have you heard this word used, or how has it affected you or other people?" You can then help the speaker who made the problematic comment to rephrase what they really meant, but without the problematic elements. But the most important is to enable the group to address them. You don't want to come across as translating for them or trying to serve their face in the conversation. "Oh, so I think what you really meant was this." No. You want them to learn from the reactions of the group to their statements. In our experience, empowering the group to self-regulate is what makes learning and shifts more sustainable. Sometimes, though, the group will fail to regulate itself and take care of its members. So it is extremely important that you, the facilitators, exert the power you have on the process and on keeping the ground rules that you have previously invited your group to adopt. As we've seen, attacks, bullying, disrespectful language have to be stopped. That is simply part of the deal that all of them agreed to when joining the dialogue. In addition, if you believe that a participant has been seriously triggered, shocked, or even traumatized during a conversation, notify Solia staff or your coach so that together with their campus, we can devise a plan to move forward with the dialogue and or find resources that support that participant. Multipartiality and neutrality don't prevent taking care of people in need, on the contrary. So please remember though that as facilitators, you're not in a position to be therapists. Even if some of you know about trauma from your work or your studies, please refrain from directly counseling a traumatized participants when you facilitate. Listen empathically and help them make sure that that participant is oriented to a professional or a team that will take care of them. The 2 campuses that are in the program have systems in place to accompany any student who may need it. So when you see something with them, just say something to us. And of course, make sure you, as a facilitator, ask for the support you need in processing a difficult session. We'll send you a few tips on how to take care of yourself, and Solia staff and coaches are always available and ready to help. That leads us to talking about the notions of safety and discomfort. As you know, dialogue is not always comfortable. In the case of First Year Connect, dialogue will surely be very uncomfortable. Let's also remember that dialogue around race will likely take a much higher toll for Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are already so fatigued by decades of such conversations, decades of slow progress and even regressions. It often happens in any discussion around race in mixed groups that while white people seek to validate their opinions, Black people seek to stay safe and bring their full selves in the space, their right to be heard. So you'll need to reflect that imbalance if it happens, and pay extra attention to Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the group, while at the same time not appearing as patronizing in the sense of a protecting parent, because that would also put them in an awkward position. Simply be mindful of the place they are constantly are in society and in the group when you ask a question or monitor a free-flowing conversation. And while your role will be to encourage participants to engage in conversations that are by definition uncomfortable, you have to ensure that no one feels hurt beyond an acceptable point, and that no one feels hurt without being acknowledged. Discomfort doesn't mean budging with safety. We know, for instance, that the current context may make the identity activity even more difficult than usual. Same with the life stories activity. Some life stories may be very painful to recollect and narrate. It may even provoke additional trauma to the pre-existing trauma. So when inviting your participants to do these activities, please be mindful of that. Acknowledge to them that this is difficult. And if someone doesn't feel safe enough to do it, please do not push them. Know that we have put in place a few systems to ensure the safety of participants. At a basic level, students will be given the space to report anything to us after each session. There will also be a hotline that they can reach out to at any point. And we are ensuring that every single session will be observed by coaches who will be briefed about detecting participants in need of help, and sometimes even by a professional from the college. Also, even if incoming students are officially required to participate, they have the right to withdraw without any consequence for their academic year. So, safety is important, and we want to apply to ourselves the do no harm principle. Nevertheless, if we agree to try this method, we need to understand that dialogue has value when it puts together people who are different and or who disagree. Again, it will be hard for Black, Indigenous, and people of color to have discussions about Black Lives Matter, for instance, or systemic racism. It will be hard for gay people to discuss gay rights, or the Don't Ask, Don't Tell debate that took place around LGBTQ++ community in the army a few years ago. Because the way those discussions have taken place in the public realm, in the press, in talk shows, on social media, have very much been felt as an identity threat, almost as a debate about whether or not they should even exist. In dialogue, though, we do things differently. We take those topics, yes, because those are topics that show how divided the society is, but we try to ensure that there is learning and that no one feels threatened by those discussions. We talk about those concepts, those ideas, those movements, those policies, etc., without falling into escalatory debates, but trying to help everyone understand how they have direct repercussions on people's lives. Through this deconstructive of concepts, dialogue can empower everyone to learn, potentially shift their positions, and ensure respect for others, even those who disagree. Everybody is screaming these days. Everybody is advocating for something, and of course, some advocacy is more in the right and legitimate than others. And it can result in more allyship for the good. but it sometimes also results in a lot of noise, more radicalization, and less understanding. We have been asked to propose our methodology of dialogue because students on campuses have shown that too many of them are unable to engage in those issues without resorting to violence or intolerance. So we're trying to implement dialogue, aware of its risks, but hopeful about what it can bring. We're doing it for the sake of those students who are coming into campus for the first time, and for the general improvement of campus life in the long run. Of course, we're not saying that your conversations will necessarily go wrong or that all you will talk about will be around race. You should be open to discover your group and adapt to their specific needs and expectations. And there are other topics that are also extremely important in First Year Connect. But it is likely that the theme of race will infuse any other topic. And when it does, it is likely that these conversations will be difficult and uncomfortable. So we just want to help you prepare for that to the extent possible. That is basically what we wanted to tell you. Like I said, there's a lot at stake with this program, not just for Solia, but for our field and even at some level for society. At the same time, and even if it's easier said than done, I want to end this by saying that we don't want to put too much pressure on yourself. We're a team. We can all make mistakes. We at Solia have definitely made some and need to learn from our mistakes and blind spots and limitations. But we'll support each other. We'll learn together and we'll grow together. Please know that what you're doing in the context that you're doing it is very brave and absolutely useful. We're proud to be working towards our mission with a community of facilitators, coaches, trainers who are so dedicated and so skilled. We could not do this without all of you. So thank you, and we do hope you will enjoy facilitating this program.